Excuse me, why do we have EQ plugins and why do I want to reach for that one when I've already got a fully parametric EQ on my console? In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of the EQ plugins and types that you might encounter in the rack on your console or as part of a plugin pack, so you can have an idea of what they're for, when to reach for them, and hopefully you can understand more of the feeling side of mixing music. Hey, if you're new here and you're passionate about making church sound great so that people can focus on Jesus, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ding the little bell to get notified every time I post a new video. Today we're going to go over 4 different vintage styles of EQ that get put into plugin form. We'll go over Neve, Holtec, API, and SSL. We'll talk about what makes each one unique and when you might reach for that over your fully parametric EQ that's built into your board. The Neve 1073 and 1081 are iconic EQs in the recording world. One of the things you'll notice at first is that the frequency selection points are all kind of odd. They're not exactly round numbers. The way those were chosen is that Rupert Neve, who recently passed, wanted to find a more musical EQ, so he analyzed the frequencies and the notes of popular keys to see where the overtones would tend to build up. So he put the EQ selector points at those spots where it would most likely correspond with buildups of overtones in music. The other thing that makes it really special is the transformers that they used had a very slow slew rate. Basically, the high frequencies don't travel through as quickly as the low frequencies, but that gives it a punchy feeling. Now, these EQs can sound really musical on a whole lot of different instruments, but where I feel like they really shine is on drums that already sound pretty good. It lacks the surgical precision that I need to cut out some junk sometimes when I'm going quickly and don't have time to fix things at the source. But if you've already got a drum that sounds good, putting your drums through these EQs, cutting the mid-range, boosting the top and the bottom end, just feels good. Now those are not specific directions. Let's listen to what it sounds like on kick and snare. It feels really good on the bass too. If the bass is a little thin, that low shelf can really work to add some girth to it, like Girth Brooks or Girth Vader. Why do I use the word girth? It's such a weird word. The mid-range frequencies also can feel really good for adding a little bit more of that bite or tone back to the bass. Especially if you've got a bass player in in-ears that's trying to feel it and so they send you a ton of low end, adding the mid-range frequencies back can give you that tone that you're missing, and it helps your mix translate well too. On vocals, it works sometimes. It depends on the voice and the mic combination and the proximity effect. Sometimes I need it to be a little bit more surgical than this one EQ can handle in a live situation. The next style of EQ that gets emulated is the Holtec EQs. These EQs are special because they're a passive EQ design. Now, I'm not an electrical engineer, but here's my layman's understanding of how it works. They use resistors and capacitors in different ways to get the tone to change on the EQ. While it's really smooth and musical, this can create a signal loss. So they have a tube output gain stage that boosts up the signal to make up for what went down with the resistors and capacitors. This gives it a nice tube feeling, but I can't describe it any more than that. You just kind of have to feel it. or imagine that you hear it, because the placebo effect is real, especially when you're looking at a really good graphical representation of this EQ. The controls on this EQ are not exactly intuitive until somebody walks you through it. So let's take a look at the EQP1A and see what it is that we're doing and what knob controls what. On the low frequencies, we've got a frequency selector, 20 Hz, 30 Hz, 60 Hz, 100 Hz. And then we've got a boost and a cut knob. If we turn up the boost knob, that boosts. If we turn up the cut knob, that cuts. But something really special happens when we turn up both at the same time. It gives this really nice shape on the low end that's very musical, and it's hard to recreate with just your plain parametric EQ. Try it on your kick drum, your bass, or your 808, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. The next section is the high frequency boost. You've got the boost control, the frequency selector, and the bandwidth. Basically, you can make this wide or narrow if you want. You also have the high frequency cut, which has its own frequency selector with 5K, 10K, 20K, and the knob that turns up to turn it down. You could use this to boost a lot of air on a vocal, but then also cut out the 5K that might be a little bit harsh. It adds a nice shape, and you just have to play with it to see what feels right. There I go talking about feelings again. These boosts on the top end work beautifully on piano, vocals, guitars, anything that you need just a little bit of sheen and to stand out a little bit more.
I've heard there is healing in your wings, and I've heard you will not reject those who come to you.
Now the MEQ5, or their mid-range equalizer, is kind of similar in that it has a boost on the bottom, a cut in the mid-range, and another boost on the top, but these are all mid-range frequencies. On this one, I love boosting 200 Hz on the bass, cutting out some of the fret clang, and then boosting some 1.5K to get a little bit more note definition. Surgical? No. Is it fun? Yes. Now, API-style EQs are not only special in the way that they have their frequency selection, which is fixed point a lot like the Neve, but rounder numbers, but also in the way that they use transformers. Their op-amp design is a very fast design, so the transients really cut through well and give it kind of a harder feeling. Again, having the fixed EQ points saves you from the myriad of options that you can get into with a sweepable frequency. The other thing about these EQs is that their frequency response is a little more pointy rather than rounded. I know, you're thinking I just totally went off the deep end, but I'm serious. You can hear a difference. The only weakness with these EQs is that it doesn't have a variable high-pass filter built in. There are some models that have a filter button that I think puts a high-pass filter at 50 and a low-pass filter at 10K or something like that. But other than that, you don't get a high-pass filter with these API EQs. One of my favorite uses for these is on drums, because you can boost a certain frequency and emphasize that above all the rest because it's pointier. I know, you still think I'm crazy, but I'm not. These really do have a feeling, okay? Gosh, stop looking at me that way! They also feel really good on guitars and pianos. I especially like cutting 200 and 400 on pianos, and these EQs are pointy enough that it doesn't affect too much on either side of that. Hey, if you're still with me and you're going to give these plugins a shot, go ahead and mash that thumbs up real quick. Now we're on to the SSL style EQs. And these are fully parametric EQs, but they offer something a little bit different. There's the E series and there's the G series. And we can nerd out for a long time about the differences, but basically it comes down to this. E series is a little bit more surgical and G series is a little bit more musical. If you want to look at a deeper discussion of this, you can check out Wave's website where they go really in depth. I tend to reach for the E series more than I reach for the G series, because I want it to be like a Swiss Army knife and I'm looking for an EQ that's a little bit more surgical. It can do basically anything you want.
How about I give you my ashes? And how about I give you my sickness? How about I give you my depression? And how about I give you my ashes? And how about I give you my sickness?
But you might be asking, why would I use this EQ compared to the built-in parametric EQ? Aren't they the same? You could argue that it has a sound to it and that there's some distortion or saturation going on with it. But the real thing that I like is it forces me to use my ears, not just my eyes, because I'm not seeing a graphical representation of what's happening with the EQ. I have to hear the EQ. You can trick your brain into thinking you're hearing something that you're seeing, and then, oh wait, the EQ's not in the circuit. That's happened to me too. If that's ever happened to you, go ahead and type bypass in the comments below. The other cool thing is that it's got 4 bands of parametric EQ, plus a high-pass filter and low-pass filter built in. And if you're on the channel strip, it's got the compression and gating already built into that too. That's a whole lot of stuff that can get packed into one plugin. Plus, it looks really cool and you can brag to your friends that you use SSL EQ. Now, in conclusion, all these EQs are really cool, but here's the trick. You have to use your ears, not your eyes. Don't get fooled into thinking you're hearing something just because you're seeing a cooler plugin on the screen. I mean, nobody else in the room can see your plugin. Why should it matter what it looks like when it matters what sound you make with it? Now, if you're wanting to take your whole church sound team to the next level, but you need a clear plan for how to get there, I've got a free guide for you called How to Lead Your Church Sound Team. There's a link to it down in the description below. Don't forget to mash thumbs up and share this video with a friend. Be sure to hit subscribe and ding the little bell to get notified every time I post a new video. And remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. And we'll see you back here next time. And don't forget to check out this video over here and this video over here.